Well, good morning and welcome to Field of View, Ohio Corn and Wheat's quarterly information series for our members and corporate partners. I'm Tad Nicholson, Executive Director of Ohio Corn and Wheat, and on behalf of our farmer-led board of directors, thanks for joining us. We have two important conversations planned for today. First, we're going to hear from Nancy Martinez, Director of Public Policy, Trade, and Biotechnology at the National Corn Growers Association. Nancy will provide an update on efforts to reduce fertilizer costs, including eliminating the countervailing duty on phosphate fertilizer, and also provide an update on where things stand with USMCA review. Then we'll be joined by Brett Barton of Element to discuss a new Ohio Corn and Wheat member benefit that could help farmers save money on their farm insurance. Let's begin with fertilizer. I know rising fertilizer costs are a major concern for everyone on this call. Ohio Corn and Wheat has been vocal about this issue, and we continue to work closely with NCGA and others to push for a more competition, greater transparency, and relief for farmers. One major part of that effort is eliminating a countervailing duty on phosphate fertilizer imported from Morocco. Nancy's been working closely following this issue and is directly involved with NCGA's efforts to address it. Nancy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tad. I will jump right in here. I'll start sharing my screen. All right, let me just get to my presentation mode. Okay, can everybody see my screen, or can I get a thumbs up from somebody? Okay, great. Brett can see it, so we're in good shape. So thanks again for having me. Ohio, good to be with you this morning. I'm originally from Indiana, so nearby, same neck of the woods almost, but I've been in Washington, D.C. A little over 13 years now. So I'm going to jump into two very important topics, starting with phosphate, but also switching to trade to talk about USMCA in a little bit. But the phosphate case is something that can really impact us. It has been impacting us. And there's some opportunities where corn growers have been able to get involved and hopefully make a difference later on. So when I am talking about this phosphate case, it is an AD/CVD investigation. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means and how we got there. So an anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigation is a process that the U.S. government has to correct an unfair trade action from a different country. So this is an instance where a country is undercutting our market share in the U.S. by selling at less than fair market value. So that's the anti-dumping. Or they are subsidizing their industry directly, and that's where we get the countervailing term from. So like I said, it's to correct these unfair trading practices. It's a process that the U.S. has, but it's also a process that many other countries around the world have replicated or have their own processes intact. There are two agencies involved in an AD/CVD investigation. And a petition can be filed from either an industry affected in the United States, or the government can self-initiate an investigation. So there's two different tracks. The International Trade Commission determines if the domestic industry has been harmed by whatever action this country has taken, and the Department of Commerce determines the rate applied. So there's a lot of calculations involved with the exact rate that should be tacked on to an import based on this unfair trade issue. So the folks that support AD/CVD investigations, and I would say up until about 5 or 10 years ago, there was a lot of support for AD/CVD investigations, right? We want the U.S. to be able to have successful manufacturing and economy. We don't want to be undercut by imports coming in. And so AD/CVD is supposed to help rectify the imbalances. However, what's been happening is that more and more companies are able to take advantage of an investigation with AD/CVD and knock out their competition. So recently, I would say in the past five years specifically, there's been more and more cases filed. More and more companies have been able to win those cases, which reduces their competition. AD/CVD investigations are super complicated, and I will tell you everything about what I know about the phosphate case here in a little bit. But every year, they can be subject to an administrative review, which will change the rate. And every 5 years, they're up for what's called a sunset review. And the sunset review basically restarts the whole process again to determine, will this domestic industry still be harmed if we scrap these duties on the imports? So that's a brief kind of background about what AD/CVD is. And now I'm going to switch over to phosphate, which is the case that we care about. So here in the United States, as you all know, you definitely need phosphate on your farms and for your operations. We have domestic production in the United States, and we have a lot of domestic production, but we have to have imports to fill the gaps needed for what farmers need to have options and to help put that pressure on price. There's two types of phosphate that we're kind of talking about here. There's phosphate rock, which is mined, and there's also processed phosphate. So imports are actually a pretty small part of the phosphate landscape. So for phosphate rock, imports are only about 10 to 15%, and for processed phosphate, it's about 15 to 30% right now. It fluctuates a lot depending on what farmers need, weather challenges, availability here, geopolitical events that we will also get into. But those are about the percentages. So the phosphate domestic industry in the United States is highly concentrated, and we can track that. So back in 1997, we had 20 firms in the United States that mined phosphate rock, but going all the way up to 2003, that dropped to 9 firms. In 2026, we are down to about 3 firms, and then there's some smaller downstream suppliers as well. So those 3 firms, Mosaic, Simplot, and Nutrient. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware that we did have a lot of domestic players in the game back in 1997, all the way up to today. There are very, very few of them. Imports have been relatively stable over the past 20 years of phosphate. Prior to 2021, Morocco and Russia supplied a lot of the imports from phosphate. And then once duties were applied in 2021, we just shifted where we got those imports from. So we didn't reduce the amount of phosphate we imported. We just switched to a different area of the world that they came from. So what happened with this case? Why is this such a big deal to us? And what has been going on? So this looks like a pretty complicated timeline, but all you really need to absorb is that there's been a lot of back and forth with the phosphate case. So one of the largest domestic producers of phosphate, Mosaic, filed a petition in 2020 saying that imports were damaging them. They were hurting their ability to compete. And the ITC actually voted in their favor in 2021, and that's when duties were applied. The case was remanded. So when you appeal a case, it goes to the Court of International Trade. And they said, hey, ITC, you messed up these calculations. We think you need to redo your how you calculated this, as well as commerce. You've got some issues too. And so they remanded the case back to the agencies. Unfortunately, the ITC said, I'm sorry, we agree with our original decision. That happened in 2024. And the case was actually remanded again. So again, CIT said, we believe that you did not accurately do these calculations. Please take a better look at it. Unfortunately, the ITC again reaffirmed its decision, and now we are in a third appeal of these original phosphate duties that were applied all the way back in 2021. So as this case is going through an appeal process, we are now approaching this 5-year sunset review. And this is a critical point. So if we make it through this case and we have some strong arguments, it's possible that the ITC could say, we realize the domestic industry doesn't need protection anymore. We are going to vote negative. So we're going to vote that the industry does not need these duties anymore, and they would go away. There's been a lot of flip-flopping around with these duties. So the current duty hovers around 16.7%. Every time the administrative review happens, the duty rate can change. And if the remand would go all the way through and be in effect, that could also impact the duty. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to where the duty actually is and what the importer has to pay. So you may think, oh, 16.7% doesn't seem that high, but it's actually that rate combined with the uncertainty that makes it really hard for the Moroccan company that we are trying to get back into the market. It makes them very hard to predict how they can enter the US market because of all of this uncertainty. So for, the phosphate case in particular, there's a lot of interest around it. There's a lot of government interest. You all have been very active in this case, having meetings about it with the Hill, talking to administration officials and others who would listen, about what exactly this duty has done, to availability in your area, reducing options for farmers. Especially when we are in this critical period of the farm economy. We've got low corn prices, really high inputs, and fertilizer is the poster child for how expensive inputs are right now. And we can definitely point to what's happening with phosphate as one of the reasons, one of the key drivers for that high cost of input. So the government is aware of this and cares about farmer views. And I talked a little bit about the farmer advocacy here too. While the ABCBD investigation is very, very complicated, moving to a third appeal is relatively uncommon. It's not rare, but it doesn't happen frequently. So because this case keeps getting remanded, that is another reason why it is so unique. Another thing that makes this case very unique is that the domestic industry is highly concentrated. So we only have a few big players in the game in the United States, and they were able to kick out their competition through this investigation. What is also fascinating is that the imports aren't dominating the US market. They are a factor in the whole phosphate portfolio, but they're not taking over. They've just kind of always been there, 10 to 15 to 30% sometimes, but they haven't, approached these really high levels to detract from the domestic market. There's also questions about, how is the ITC calculating if the domestic industry is harmed when we're so highly concentrated? And those are questions that have, kept coming up and something that, the administration, Congress, that we are all raising and thinking about. So what to do with phosphate? What is the path forward? So we are approaching the sunset review. It's 5 years once after the duty rate was applied. So 5 plus 2021 brings us to 2026. The case will have a hearing. It'll have a submissions process. And that hearing will be towards the end of the year. And that's an opportunity for corn growers to put our opinions forward. Within the sunset review, it's actually very restricted as to what can be considered from third parties. Because we are not an importer or the domestic industry, we are what's considered a third party. And so we have very restricted parameters as to how we can talk about the case and how farmers are affected. However, it's still very, very important for us to be a part of this sunset review, to participate at the hearing, to file our opinions, and to help motivate Congress to share our perspective as well. What is really fascinating about this sunset review is that the ITC will have a whole new slate of commissioners when they review the phosphate case. The ITC commission currently has 6 spots, but 3 of them are vacant. And so we are with this kind of low functioning commission, and we keep getting these bad decisions. Hopefully having an additional 5 new folks plus 1 other spot there will move us into a better position, at least get some new faces that are more sympathetic to our views. I'm not going to say, the new makeup of the commission will be a guaranteed more on our side. But what I can say is that the current ITC makeup is not doing us any favors, and we keep losing. So participating in this sunset review is going to be our top priority to make sure that we do everything that we can, working with our other commodities too that are affected as we submit materials. There's also a couple different other things we can try. The president does have some executive administrative authority to act on the phosphate duties, to remove them, especially given the global challenges right now. However, he has not acted to do that yet. It is legally complicated. but we do believe he has that authority and we encourage him to use it. But of course, we want to win the case in the sunset review as well. There's also something that we're pursuing on the reform side. So because AD/CVD is so restricted into what farmers can actually talk about and mention, and there's not a bigger consideration to the total farm economy. Those are things that we would love inserted into the review process, and we're working on some legislation to do that. So the last thing I will mention is that federal agencies, like I said, unprecedented interest and involvement from federal agencies on the phosphate case, but also on fertilizer issues more generally and about the concentration and bad actions of some of the companies who have kept prices high. So the FTC has launched this investigation into fertilizer. And if you have anything that you would like to share with the FTC, any examples, they actually have set up a complaints web address that you can submit anything, fertilizercomplaints@ftc.gov. So it's really important for if you have any examples, any information for the FTC to help them in their investigation to get that to them. So I'm kind of approaching halfway, Tad, so I'll hand it back to you if there's anything that you want to talk about on phosphate or anything I should cover.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, Nancy. And clearly a lot happening on this issue. So thanks for helping us understand a little bit better. So we did have a meeting down in Texas, and Nancy mentioned this. It was with the chairman, Andrew Ferguson, came down to a farm in Texas, and several farmers from Ohio and Nancy was down there. 18 different states were represented, and that's where the chairman made the announcement that the FTC is involved with a federal investigation on the fertilizer industry. And so this was a big public announcement. It was something very significant. But the one thing that they recognize is that many people are reluctant to talk to the FTC about information that they have. And that's why they created this fertilizer complaints at ftc.gov. It's a portal that you will have confidentiality that will be remained, and they will protect anybody that has information. So if you or anyone else has information you think that might help the FTC's investigation, please go ahead and let them know. If you'd like some help, please let me know as well. Nancy, while I have you, I also want to, before we shift our conversation to trade, want to see if there are any, well, let's do questions at the end. Let's go on into trade, because the other thing that you help lead for National Corn Growers Association, really a coalition across DC, is the USMCA review process. So as we talk about what's going on with Canada and Mexico, can you bring us up to speed on where things are currently stand and how much should we be reading into some of the President Trump's recent comments on this agreement?
Yes, all very, very important things for U.S. corn growers. The USMCA is corn's most important trading agreement. It's our top two markets by far for corn and ethanol, and it's absolutely vital that it sticks around. So we are approaching another review process, but this time it's a 6-year review process. So the United States-Mexico Canada agreement. It was first entered into force in 2020. It replaced NAFTA. It took about 18 months or so for negotiations to finalize and the agreement to be signed by all three countries. So in USMCA, there's what's called a 6-year review. So at the 6-year mark, which we're approaching on July 1st, 2026, just about a week away, all three countries have to meet and decide what they're going to do with the USMCA. Are they going to extend it automatically? Are they going to move to terminate it? Or are they going to consult about it and leave us in limbo? If all three countries want to terminate the agreement, it would happen in 10 years from this point, so in 2036. If they would want to extend it, it would be for another 16 years, bringing us to 2042. If we enter this period of annual consultations, all three countries have to meet every year, staying in basically a constant negotiation mode, and there's no finality on the resolution. So the USMCA has been extraordinarily beneficial to U.S. corn growers. First of all, it guarantees duty-free trade access. So we can get our corn to Mexico without an additional duty. We can get our ethanol to Canada without a tariff or a duty applied. Under the USMCA, our imports have really exploded. They've almost doubled to Mexico, and we have completely replaced China as Mexico has replaced China as the top market. And that's important because there's, as you know, a lot of risk with the China market. And we've had the stability with Mexico. The close proximity has been very beneficial for corn exports. They're also the top DDGs market for U.S. corn growers. There's a couple different tools under USMCA that's very beneficial to corn growers. So one thing is the regulatory efficiencies that USMCA provides. So if there's a change in, a border inspection issue or a regulatory update, all three countries have to be aware about it when it happens, and this helps to reduce any barriers or lag time. Regulatory efficiencies included in USMCA help things just generally flow more easier across borders. That means cost savings for farmers as well. The other category that I'm going to mention is this dispute settlement category. So you may remember a few years ago, Mexico tried to ban biotech corn. This is very important and alarming because over 94% of the corn grown in the United States is derived from biotechnology. So when Mexico pursued this presidential decree, it could have really interrupted trade between our two countries. Corn growers pressured the US government to take action on this and to correct this behavior from Mexico, this policy decree. And what happened was we used a tool in USMCA called dispute settlement in order to bring forward the case. A panel was established and they issued a final panel report that was in the US's favor. So it showed two things, that Mexico didn't use science in their decisions and they violated USMCA. So the panel report was overwhelmingly siding with the United States. Canada also joined that report on the US side. And so what happened when that report was issued, Mexico actually took their own action to withdraw the decree, to withdraw those portions of the decree that banned biotechnology. And that was a very, very good sign because it showed that Mexico was abiding by the terms in USMCA. We didn't have to escalate the trading relationship. We didn't have to throw around tariffs or escalate it in a different way. Mexico stuck to the terms of the agreement and withdrew their decree. So that is a really great example of how U.S. corn growers benefited from the tools in USMCA. So we didn't have this trade barrier that would have really interrupted our trading relationship with Mexico. So as we are getting ready for the USMCA review, last year we submitted our comments, over 10 pages of comments about how corn growers benefit from USMCA. And we were keeping track of who else was submitting comments. And we put together a stakeholder letter that was about general USMCA benefits. And we got over 120 groups to sign that letter. And so we quickly figured out that a lot of US ag groups benefit from USMCA and rely on Mexico and Canada as their top markets. So these are just some big numbers about how USMCA benefits the total US ag economy and the US economy in general. $1.9 trillion of goods traded under USMCA. Over 60 billion of that of American ag exports go to Mexico and Canada, which is about a third of all of our ag exports. Got 13 million American jobs supported by trade with Canada and Mexico. We also have 500,000 jobs just supported by ag trade under USMCA. And we've got 31% of all US trade-related rail traffic tied to Canada and Mexico. So these are very, very important economic numbers. USMCA is a clear driver of jobs and the economy and helps us support our communities that we live in. So we figured out very quickly that a bunch of ag groups in the United States have the same opinions about USMCA, but we weren't seeing that positive message be a big factor in how the administration was approaching the review. So we had a problem, and we had to quickly put together a public campaign to make sure that our positive messages were making an impact. So we launched the Agricultural Coalition for USMCA back in February of 2026 of this year. We've been doing non-sub activities ever since then. And we've got a website, agforusmca.com, with tons of material, specific state information as well. And just to cover really quick what the outlook is on USMCA, we are in a stronger negotiating place with Mexico. We are having bilateral rounds occur with Mexico. We just wrapped one up last week here in Washington, D.C. This was the second negotiating round that we've had with them. We've got one upcoming around the July 20th week. Canada, however, is not in the same negotiating stance. However, in the past couple weeks, the Canadian government has been unfrozen, more willing to talk with the administration about USMCA progress, but they still have a lot of catching up to do to match the pace that we've set with Mexico. We do know that our materials have been reaching the administration's ears, as well as Congress. However, we still have some uphill battles. Tad mentioned on the outset that the president made some comments recently, talking about wanting to terminate USMCA, that we don't need these trade deals, and questioning their importance overall. However, it's still really early in the USMCA review process, and the president is a negotiator. And this is kind of his style that we've seen over the course of his time in office. So while I don't want to, put too much weight into how he's characterized the agreement, it is something for us to be aware of, and we still have to keep the positive drumbeat going about how USMCA benefits U.S. agriculture. Something that we always talk about too is the certainty that the ag economy needs, and that USMCA provides that. It locks up those key markets, those foundational markets for U.S. agriculture, allows us to plan for the future and weather tough times. So that's the message that we've been carrying to Congress, to the administration, to our other stakeholders, and that's what we will keep doing while this review is taking place. So I know I'm approaching 9:30 very quickly, Tad, but I'll hand it back to you for some questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nancy. I appreciate that. And before we move on, we do have time for one or two questions from you. Clearly, this is the most important trade agreement that we have, and a big issue with this countervailing duty, that it's an immediate effect on farmers. So if you have something you'd like to ask Nancy about fertilizer or USMCA, just raise your hand at the bottom of your screen or enter it into the chat now. We do need to keep this portion a little bit short so that we can move on to an important new Ohio Corn and Wheat member benefit that could help farmers save money in this tight farm economy. So, Nancy, there was one question that already came into the chat, and that is, who are the ITC commissioners and how are they selected?
That is a very good question. So they have to be nominated by the president, and they have to pass the Senate. So right now, there are 5 ITC commissioners that are making their way through the Senate confirmation process. And this week, actually, on Thursday, they will have a nominations hearing where they'll have to answer questions from the Senate Finance Committee. The Senate Finance Committee then has to vote to approve them, to move them out of committee. And then they will have to be considered by the full Senate. So the full Senate will have to vote on them, or they could pass them kind of via voice vote, unanimous consent. There are 5 new commissioners. They each have different backgrounds. Typically, the commission is a bipartisan commission. So there are 2 Democratic nominees, Sam Nagatu and Bart Thonheiser. Both have had roles with Democratic administrations, and Bart actually currently works for USTR. And then we also have 2 Republican commissioners that are moving. So we have David Foley, Brett Doyle, who currently works at USTR. And then we've got another one who is a Senate staffer for Senator Tillis, Peter Anthony Pappas. So these are all commissioners that are moving to the Senate right now, and they will have to answer questions in front of senators. And we've given senators a lot of ideas of questions that they can ask these commissioners.
That's a good sign that we have these new commissioners coming in because the last group made a decision we wish they didn't make, and they may be tending to stick to that decision. Having a new
Yep.
faces in there maybe gives us a fighting chance. So the whole system though is built around protecting U.S. companies, manufacturers, not the
Yep.
customers that are buying the products. So us making as much noise as we can is a very important thing, and that's when the grassroots activity has to come in through Ohio Corn and Wheat and the National Corn Growers Association.
Absolutely.
Nancy, thanks again for joining us and for all the work that you and the NCGA team are doing on behalf of Ohio corn farmers.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to shift our conversation to a new member benefit that may be able to help save you money. Element is a diamond level corporate partner for Ohio Corn and Wheat and works with farmers as farm risk advisors, helping them better understand their insurance coverage, identify potential gaps, and make sure that they're not paying more than they need to. Through our partnership with Element, Ohio Corn and Wheat members now have access to a benefit that could result in significant savings on their farm insurance. I want to be clear, this is not a sales pitch. Oh, sorry. It's not a sales pitch. This is simply an opportunity to learn more about the benefits that are available to you as an Ohio Corn and Wheat member, and one that we believe is worth your time. Joining us to explain how it works is Brett Barton, Vice President of Commercial and Benefits with Element. Brett, before we get into the member benefit, can you tell us a little bit more about Element, the work that you do as farm risk advisors, and what makes your approach different?
Yeah, absolutely, Ted. It's my pleasure to be here today. I just want to make sure too, is my screen sharing okay and you guys can see that?
Yep, sure is.
Awesome. Very, very good. So, like Tad said, I am Brett Barton, Vice President of Commercial Insurance and Employee Benefits and a partner here at Element, right? So, what is Element? You guys have seen our logo probably at some meetings on some literature. So, what is Element? Who are we, right? We are a privately held, independent insurance agency with several offices across 3 states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. I personally call home Southwest Ohio. Go Bucks. So I'm going to age myself here a little bit, but it is what it is. Over decades, we've intentionally built a full service platform that delivers integrated solutions, including farm, property, and casualty insurance, multi-peril crop insurance, employee benefits, and wealth management. So we look to protect your day-to-day farming operations while also securing your long-term financial future. So why Element, right? There's a lot of stuff you see on the screen right now, and I'm going to make this short and sweet, right? At Element, our core clients or the true engine of our business are farmers. Very, very proud to say that we are the largest privately held independent insurance agency, farm insurance agency in the state of Ohio, right? So we've worked a long time to do this. It's the bread and butter, again, of our agency. We've built our agency around agriculture. So we've built also a dedicated farm team of what we call risk advisors, who don't just understand agriculture, they live it. And I'm gonna share a little bit more about these guys on my Ohio team here a little bit later in the presentation. So you asked, what makes our approach a little different? I feel like we do take a different approach here at Element. So especially with our farm clients, the first thing we ask is we ask for an opportunity to meet on your farm, often right at the kitchen table, out in the shop, on the bed of a pickup truck, doesn't matter to us. But we want to understand your operation firsthand. We want to know what matters most to you and what concerns keep you up at night. From there, we walk the farm with you to see your risk and assets in real time. After what we call this discovery visit with you, we take what we've learned back to the office to identify gaps relative to your priorities. And also, since we're advisors, we provide thoughtful, tailored recommendations. So it doesn't just stop there either, right? This is what's definitely a differentiator between us and maybe some other agents out there in Ohio is once you become a client here at Element, we work with you from day one to establish a clear service plan, including how often we meet and when those touch points occur throughout the year. We understand you probably don't want to meet with your farm insurance advisor while you're putting seed in the ground or maybe when you're taking that crop out of the ground, right? For most of you, unless it's a rainy day, and we get that. And so we work this out with you from day one. In addition, what we also provide to some of our larger farm operations is we provide some value-added services, such as a fire extinguisher recharge or replacement program for your combines. We also give you access to an in-house CCA, Certified Crop Advisor. I'll share a little bit more about him later. And we also give, for those of you that do have employees on the farm, we offer an HR platform that we pay for that supports you in managing employees and the wonderful navigation of workforce related questions. So hopefully, Tad, that sort of clears up a little bit about how we approach things a little bit differently.
Yeah, Brett, I thought changing farm insurance was a painful process. You're kind of saying it doesn't have to be.
It does not have to be, right? It's a difficult thing. And first of all, I understand and I respect, right, that changing agents can be difficult. I mean, we've got a couple thousand farm clients, and I really appreciate them trusting us and staying with us. So I understand it's a difficult decision, right? And so today it's not like Tad mentioned, it's not a sales pitch, right? We are just asking, right, for an opportunity to earn a first conversation. That's it. From there, it's on us to demonstrate our value. So now we're to the member benefit part. Like, what is this, right? What is Element doing here? What are they providing for us as members of the Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association, right? So we recognize, right, and we have for the last few years that farm profit margins are tightening, which is why we actively looked for ways to help reduce your overall insurance cost. So through our partnership with Western Reserve, one of the largest farm insurance carriers in the state, we are able to offer an exclusive discount to Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association members available only through us here at Element. We took Tad, and you know this because I've worked with Tad for now over a year on this, but it took almost a year to put this together with OCW and Western Reserve. And we are so proud to finally get it across the finish line with both OCW and Western Reserve to make it happen. So once again, Tad, all I ask is give us a shot.
Brett, you're right. It's something that we've checked out, and we have board members that have gone through the process with you and have experienced, significant savings, which gives us a lot of confidence in advising our members. If you're if it's time for you to take a look at your farm insurance, I think this is a great opportunity to save a lot of money on farm insurance. So, Brett, if someone wants to get more information about you and visit with your team, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple of things here at the agency is we have a number, first and foremost, we have a dedicated phone line that you can call in. You will get some of my farm team members on the line, have a short conversation, set up a meeting with one of my advisors here in Ohio. So that number's on the screen. Hopefully this is shared with the membership later after the meeting here, but it's 740-342-0100. We've also created, for those of you that use the internet a lot, we've created a specific URL on our website. So that is elementrisk.com/OCWGA. Very, very short form you fill out, name, email, phone, maybe a short description of maybe what you're looking for from us to take a look at your farm insurance. The folks on the screen here, this is my Ohio team, right? So definitely want to share this with, so when I say that they not only talk the talk, but they walk the walk, just to share real quick, Tad. So Wade Ruthmel, he's the in-house CCA, Certified Crop Advisor. He is also farm advisor that does a lot of farm insurance here for the agency. Wade's background is nothing but farm. He's been in farm since high school, went to school, went to college for ag. He worked and managed a co-op for years before joining my team about 3 years ago. Michael Sweeney, he's first of all, Wade Ruthmel's in Western Ohio. Michael Sweeney's in Eastern Ohio for me. Michael does a few things. He writes farm insurance as well, but he also manages my crop division here at Element. And I would put him at the very top of the list when it comes to crop insurance knowledge, I'll tell you that. Michael also farms about 3,500 acres himself over in Eastern Ohio. Michael Sedini, back in the western part of the state. Michael Sedini does a lot of farm insurance for the agency. He farms 5,000 acres himself. He runs a seed treatment facility in Western Ohio and also a drone operation now. So again, they don't just understand farm insurance, they understand farms, Tad.
Well, once again, giving us a great deal of confidence about our partnership with Elements. So, Brett, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much.
I'd encourage all of our members to take a closer look and decide for yourself whether a conversation with the Element team would benefit your farm. Before we close, I want to mention that nominations are now open for the Ohio Corn and Wheat's Emerging Leaders Program. It's a good way for farmers to get a better feel for Ohio Corn and Wheat, the work that we're doing here, and learn about joining one of our 3 boards. If you know of a farmer that you think would be a good fit, you can nominate them or yourself right after this meeting by visiting ohiocornandwheat.org. That's all the time we have, so thank you to everyone for joining, and thank you for being a member and a partner of Ohio Corn and Wheat.